Hey guys, in this video I did 100 tier 5 solo dungeons while faction flagged in the yellow zone and tracked the rewards. I'm going to be comparing some of the results to my previous videos where I do 100 tier 6, 7, and 8 solo dungeons, so make sure you check those ones out. Links will be in the description. So I did these dungeons out of Thetford because at the time of recording here, Thetford has the best faction point to silver exchange ratio, and I did them with a standard grade X build so I could clear them as fast as possible. Now note that I am pretty low spec in grade X, so it probably would have been faster for me to use something that I'm higher spec in, but I still cleared relatively quickly. The total time it took was 10.5 hours, which comes out to around 6 minutes and 20 seconds per dungeon. This is much faster than even the tier 6 dungeons I did in the Black Zone, as those were an average of 7 minutes and 12 seconds per dungeon. So this is almost a minute faster every single dungeon, which is very nice. And this is partly because the time in between dungeons is a lot less in yellow zones, as there is quite a lot of dungeons in yellow zones with recent updates. Now, despite being faction flagged, these dungeons were fairly safe. I got dove one time by faction flagged people, and then another time, I'm not sure if I should consider this a dive or not. You can see it on screen here. I don't really know what these guys were doing, but so dove once or twice. That's pretty good for doing 100 dungeons, as tier 6s, for example, would be probably, I'm guessing, a little bit more dangerous. When I did them, I never got dove, but if you consider all the time you have to spend going to and from them in the Black Zone, you have opportunities to get ganked there. So they're probably around as dangerous as tier 6 dungeons in the Black Zone when you're faction flagged, but probably not quite as dangerous. Moving on to some of the random stats I recorded, I went through 164 floors in these 100 dungeons, and on those 164 floors, there was 130 of the buff shrines, with 48 being green, 48 white, and 34 being red. This follows similar patterns to the tier 6s and 7s in terms of buff shrines, with greens and whites being high and reds being a little bit lower. In terms of chests, again, we see a similar pattern to pretty much all the rest of the dungeons, with 56 common green chests, 110 uncommon blue chests, 36 rare or epic chests, and 4 legendary or gold chests. Obviously, having the 4 legendary chests is the most unusual thing about this, as the max I got was 2 with tier 6s, and the 7s and 8s only had 1 each, so this is quite a lot more legendary chests, which is quite nice. So I think I got pretty lucky on the gold chests there. In fact, I even had 2 legendary gold chests in one dungeon, which was, I imagine, almost never happens. For fame chests, again, we see a similar pattern to the rest of the dungeons, with 11 green, 8 blue, and 4 purple, and these totaled to 150 beginner tomes of insight. There was also 18 fame or silver pools. Moving on to the fame that I got from these dungeons, the total amount of fame was 1.2 mil. Yes, that low. It was incredibly low amount of fame compared to the dungeons I did in the Black Zone. I was sort of expecting it to be quite a bit less, as yellow zones are dangerous, but 1.2 mil is significantly less than I was getting in the Black Zone. So this was around 114k fame per hour, not including the tome drops. But if you compare that to even the tier 6s, which were the lowest of the fame per hour for the other ones in the Black Zone, the tier 6s in the Black Zone were 625,000 per hour, almost 6 times as much as these tier 5s in the yellow zone. So if you're planning on doing dungeons for fame, I would highly suggest moving to the Black Zone unless you really can't afford to lose the set you're wearing. So if these aren't something you want to do for fame, is the loot good? Looking at the loot here, it doesn't seem all that great. I mean, there's tier 3 items in here, which is never a good sign, but there is a few things that are a little bit higher tier, might be a little more expensive. There's like an excellent heron spear here. There's some higher enchanted gear, nothing really above tier 6 though. In terms of the second tab, the boots, again, similar to all the gear there. The money seems to be coming more in like the capes and bags, it looks like, almost, with some Morgana capes, some keeper capes, and undead there, and then I have like a 5/3 bag here and quite a bit of tier 6 or 6 equivalent bags, which is nice. Looking at the bags of silver even, comparing this to any of the Black Zone dungeons that I've done in the past, because it's like a significantly lower amount of silver bags. Tier 6s were around 3 mil from silver bags. This is looking around just over 1 mil. So that's a significant difference. And Tomes of Insight as well from the mob drops, only 18 here, whereas others were around 70. I did also get some tier 8 relics from these dungeons though, which is pretty nice. Those are going to sell for quite a bit. And then random miscellaneous stuff. Actually no Swift Claw Cubs, which is kind of surprising. But I can get this all sold and we'll see how much it's actually all worth. So for selling the loot, I sold it all to the Caerleon market. I didn't bother going to the black market at all, as I didn't really have any super high tier or rare items. There was a couple that I probably could have got a little bit of a better deal with, but I was just too lazy to go there. So the gear, all the weapons, armor, things like that, sold for around 1.8 mil. The capes and bags sold for around 1.6 mil. The total amount in the silver bags collected was just over 1 mil. All the miscellaneous random stuff sold for around 1.5 mil, and the Tomes of Insight sold for just over 500k. This comes to a total of right around 6.5 mil, or 624k per hour. When comparing this to the loot from the tier 6s and 7s that I did in the Black Zone, again this is pretty significantly less, as the tier 6s and 7s were around 1.3 mil an hour. However, we have to remember that I was also faction flagged. So how much money did I make in total from the faction points? I accumulated just over 150,000 points for Thetford, and the exchange ratio, at most I could get at 30 silver per point, which would come out to around 4.5 mil for faction points. But for that I would need to farm up a little bit more and get to Revered in Thetford so that I could buy the tier 8 crests. So if I wanted to sell them all right now, I could sell them for a little bit less, totaling to around 4 mil cash. If we add this total money to the price check for all the gear I got, that comes to just over 10.5 mil as our total, or around 1 mil per hour. This total is much more in line with the tier 6s and 7s, as 1 mil an hour isn't really that much different from the 1.3 mil an hour I was getting from the tier 6s and 7s in the Black Zone. So is it worth it? Are doing tier 5 solo dungeons faction flagged in the Yellow Zone worth it over doing, let's say, tier 6s in the Black Zone? In my opinion, I think if you're doing it for fame, the answer is definitely not. You definitely don't want to be in the Yellow Zone if you want to get fame. However, for money, I can see it being worth it. It's just a little bit less money per hour than you'd get from doing tier 6s, and I think it's probably a little bit safer. So if you want something that's a little bit safer than the Black Zone while still making good money, I would highly suggest doing these